You're not the kind of woman someone builds a future with. The words didn't echo. They sliced clean, quiet, final, as if the room itself had agreed with him before he even spoke them. The chandelier light shimmered above 100 polished glasses. Soft jazz floated through the air, and every head in the ballroom turned just enough to witness the moment without appearing obvious. Lily Carter stood frozen at the center of it all, her fingers still curled around the edge of a velvet ring box that was never opened. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and the version of her that existed just 5 seconds ago. She could feel it, the shift. Not loud, not dramatic, just a subtle pulling away, like the room itself had decided she no longer belonged in it. Her dress, carefully altered from a clearance rack find, suddenly felt too thin, too obvious. Her heels, worn but polished, pressed uncomfortably into the marble floor as if reminding her exactly where she stood. Across from her, Daniel barely flinched. His tux fit perfectly, his posture untouched, his expression calm in that rehearsed, detached way of someone who had already made peace with the damage they were about to cause. "I need someone who fits my world," he added, quieter this time, but somehow worse. A few people shifted. Someone coughed. No one stepped in. Lily blinked once, slowly, as if that might wake her up from whatever this was. But nothing changed. The music continued. Glasses clinked. Conversations resumed in hushed tones that tried to sound like they hadn't just witnessed something personal being dismantled in public. She felt her grip loosen, the small box slipping slightly in her hand before she steadied it again, not out of hope, but out of habit, because holding on was something she had always been good at. For a second, just a second, her eyes flickered around the room, searching not for help, but for something familiar, something grounding. Instead, she found reflections, mirrors of people who had already moved on from her moment. That was when she realized the truth no one said out loud. Rejection like this didn't just take something from you, it erased you. And then, quietly, from the edge of the room, someone noticed she hadn't begged. Not once. Not even now, as the silence stretched longer than it should have. A man stood near the back, half-shadowed by a column, his gaze steady, unreadable. He didn't step forward. He didn't interrupt. But unlike everyone else, he didn't look away either. Lily inhaled, finally, slow and controlled, and closed the ring box with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than anything else that night. Then she lifted her chin, not high, not defiant, just enough, and turned. No tears, no scene, just movement. One step, then another, each one carrying her further from the version of herself that had walked into this room, believing she was about to be chosen. Behind her, the music swelled again, louder this time, as if trying to fill the space she left behind. But the man in the shadows didn't move. Not yet, because sometimes the moment that changes everything doesn't begin with the one who falls, it begins with the one who sees it happen. The cold night air hit her the moment the glass doors closed behind her, sharp and immediate, like reality finally catching up to her skin. And for the first time since it happened, Lily Carter stopped walking. Not because she wanted to, but because her body no longer knew where to go next. The city stretched out in front of her in streaks of yellow lights and passing cars, loud, alive, indifferent, and she stood there on the sidewalk in heels that suddenly felt 2 sizes too small, clutching that same unopened ring box like it still meant something, like it had not just been reduced to a quiet joke played out under crystal chandeliers, her reflection flickering faintly in the glass behind her. A girl who almost became someone else tonight. A girl who almost believed she was enough for a life she had been carefully stepping toward for months, maybe years, and now that version of her was gone, not shattered, not broken, just dismissed, like a name crossed off a list no one double checks. She let out a slow breath, steady, controlled, because falling apart out here would feel too much like proving him right, and she refused to give him that, not even now. Not even when her chest felt tight and her thoughts were trying to catch up to everything she had just lost. The job, the relationship, the illusion of belonging in a room that had never really made space for her in the first place. She shifted her weight, wincing slightly as the edge of her heel pressed into her ankle, and without thinking too much about it, she slipped the shoes off and held them in one hand, the cool pavement grounding her in a way nothing else could, real, immediate, honest. Just like every step she had taken to get here, nothing handed to her, Nothing guaranteed. Just effort. Just endurance. Just quiet persistence that no one ever applauded. And maybe that was the part that hurt the most. Not that she was rejected, but that it happened so easily, like she had never been a serious choice to begin with. A gust of wind brushed past her, carrying faint laughter from inside the building, already moving on without her. And she almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because it made something clear, something simple, something she should have seen sooner, that she had been trying to fit into a life that required her to shrink, to adjust, to apologize for things that were never wrong to begin with, and that realization did not fix anything. It did not pay her rent or undo the humiliation, but it gave her something steadier than hope. It gave her direction. She tightened her grip on the ring box for a moment, then looked down at it, really looked this time, before sliding it into her bag without ceremony. No dramatic gesture, no symbolic throw, just a quiet decision to stop carrying it like it mattered. And as she lifted her head again, ready to take another step into whatever came next, a voice behind her broke through the noise of the city, calm, measured, and unexpectedly close. "You handled that better than anyone else in that room would have." Lily paused, just slightly, not turning right away, because something about the tone, the certainty in it, made it feel different from the empty sympathy people offered out of obligation. And when she finally glanced over her shoulder, she saw him, the same man from the back of the room, standing a few feet away now, hands relaxed at his sides, expression composed but attentive, like he had been watching not the spectacle, but her. And for a second, just a second, Lily felt something shift again, not the same sharp loss from earlier, but something quieter, something unfamiliar, like the beginning of a moment that had not decided what it wanted to become yet. For a brief moment, Lily said nothing, not because she did not have words, but because she had learned that not every voice deserved a response, especially not tonight. And yet something about him did not feel like noise. It felt intentional. She turned slowly, her bare feet still pressed against the cold sidewalk, her heels dangling loosely from her fingers, and studied him the same way she had learned to study everything that entered her life unexpectedly, carefully, without rushing to trust or dismiss. He was not dressed like the others inside. No polished tuxedo, no exaggerated confidence, just a simple dark coat, tailored but understated, the kind of presence that did not ask for attention but somehow held it anyway. His eyes met hers without hesitation, not scanning, not judging, just seeing. "You did not try to convince him," he added, his voice even, like he was stating a fact rather than offering comfort. Lily let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "Would it have changed anything?" she asked, her tone calm, steady, the kind of calm that comes after something is already broken and there is nothing left to protect. He tilted his head slightly, considering her answer. "No," he admitted. "But most people still would have tried." She nodded once, more to herself than to him, because she knew that was true. She had seen it before, people bending, reshaping themselves just enough to be accepted, just enough to stay, and maybe a part of her used to believe that was strength. But tonight had made something clear. Staying at the cost of yourself was never strength. It was just a quieter form of losing. A car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating the space between them before fading again, and neither of them moved. Not yet. "You walked away," he continued, softer now. "That is rare." Lily glanced down at her shoes for a second, then back up at him. "It did not feel rare," she said honestly. "It felt necessary." Something in his expression shifted then, subtle, but real, like that word had landed somewhere deeper than expected. "Necessary," he repeated quietly, as if testing the weight of it. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded handkerchief, holding it out toward her, not in a dramatic gesture, not even stepping closer, just offering it like it was the most normal thing in the world. Lily looked at it, then at him, slightly confused. "I am not crying," she said, almost instinctively. He gave a faint, almost amused smile. "I know," he replied. "It is for your feet." She blinked once, caught off guard, then glanced down at the pavement beneath her, a small, unexpected breath escaping her lips, not quite laughter, but close. And for the first time since she walked out of that room, something inside her eased, just a little. She took the handkerchief, hesitating only for a second before wrapping it loosely around the sole of one foot. The fabric soft against her skin, warmer than the ground. "Thank you," she said quietly. And this time, she meant more than just the gesture. He nodded once, like gratitude did not need to be expanded into something bigger. "What are you going to do now?" he asked, not prying, not pushing, just asking the kind of question that assumed she still had choices. Lily looked out at the street again. The city still moving, still alive, still offering 1,000 directions she had not planned for. "I am going to keep going," she answered after a moment, her voice steady, certain in a way it had not been earlier. "I just do not know where yet." He studied her for a second longer, then gave a small nod, like that answer was enough, like it always had been. And then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Good." Not as approval, not as praise, but as recognition, and somehow, that single word carried more weight than anything anyone had said to her all night, because it did not try to fix her situation. It simply acknowledged that she was still standing, and for the first time since everything fell apart, that felt like it might actually be enough to start again. They stood there for a moment longer, not awkward, not rushed, just suspended in a space that neither of them seemed eager to break, until a gust of wind swept down the street, sharper this time, brushing past Lily's bare ankles and reminding her that the night was not going to pause for her recovery. She shifted slightly, adjusting the handkerchief around her foot, then glanced at him again. "I should probably start walking," she said, not as an excuse, but as a decision. He nodded, stepping back just enough to give her space without stepping away completely. "Which direction?" he asked, and the question caught her off guard, not because it was complicated, but because it assumed she had one. Lily hesitated, her eyes scanning the street, left or right, both equally uncertain, both equally open. She almost said she did not know, but something stopped her. Something about the way he had spoken earlier, like uncertainty, was allowed, but standing still forever was not. She lifted her chin slightly and gestured to the right. "That way," she said, choosing not based on logic, but on movement itself. He gave a small nod, then without asking, fell into step beside her, not too close, not distant either, just there, like a presence that did not demand anything. The sound of their footsteps, hers softer, his steady, blended into the rhythm of the city, passing cars, distant voices, the occasional hum of neon signs, flickering to life as the night deepened. For a few blocks, neither of them spoke, and strangely, it did not feel uncomfortable. It felt like a quiet reset, like her thoughts were finally catching up to her body, reorganizing themselves into something that made sense again. She glanced down at the handkerchief once more, then back at him. "You always carry those around?" she asked, a hint of curiosity slipping into her tone. He looked down briefly, then back ahead. "Not always," he replied. "Just when I expect the night might surprise me." Lily let out a soft breath that almost turned into a smile, not because the answer was clever, but because it felt honest in a way most conversations were not. They reached a crosswalk, the red hand blinking steadily above them. And as they stopped, Lily noticed a small food cart on the corner, the smell of pretzels and roasted nuts drifting through the air, warm, simple, grounding. Her stomach tightened slightly, a quiet reminder that she had skipped dinner, that everything tonight had been leading to a moment that never came. She looked away quickly, not wanting that small detail to become visible, but he had already noticed, not in a way that made her feel exposed, just aware. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked, casually, like he was asking about the weather. Lily hesitated, then shrugged lightly. "I will be fine," she said, which was not exactly an answer. He studied her for half a second, then reached into his pocket again, pulling out a few bills, not making a show of it, not offering them to her directly. Instead, he stepped toward the cart, exchanged a few quiet words with the vendor, and returned with a small paper bag, warm from the inside. He held it out toward her. "It is not much," he said simply. Lily looked at the bag, then at him, her instinct to refuse rising immediately, not out of pride, but out of habit, the same habit that had taught her to survive without expecting help. But something about the way he offered it, no pressure, no explanation, no expectation of gratitude, made it different. It did not feel like charity. It felt like consideration. She took the bag slowly, her fingers brushing the warmth through the paper. "Thank you," she said again, softer this time, and he just nodded, like before, like that was enough. The light changed. The red hand replaced by a white walking figure. And as they stepped off the curb together, Lily realized something she had not expected. The night had not changed. Her situation had not magically improved, but somehow, step by step, it no longer felt like she was walking through it alone. The warmth from the paper bag lingered in Lily's hands as they reached the other side of the street, a small, quiet contrast to everything that had unraveled just an hour ago. And for the first time that night, she allowed herself to open it, the soft scent of freshly baked bread rising gently. Simple, unpretentious, real. She pulled out a small piece, hesitating only a second before taking a bite, the taste grounding her in a way that words could not, reminding her that even after everything, her body still needed the same basic things: food, warmth, breath. Life did not pause for heartbreak. It just kept moving, and somehow, she had to move with it. She swallowed slowly, then glanced at him. "You did not have to do that," she said, not rejecting the gesture, just acknowledging it. He shrugged lightly, his gaze forward. "I know," he replied, and that was it. No explanation, no attempt to make it meaningful. Just a quiet choice that did not need to be justified. They walked another block in silence, but it was no longer the heavy kind from before. It had shifted into something easier, like a conversation that did not rely on words to exist. Lily adjusted her grip on the bag, then spoke again, this time with a hint of curiosity she had not expected to feel tonight. "So, do you always walk strangers home after they have their lives fall apart in public?" she asked, the corner of her mouth lifting just slightly. He glanced at her briefly, a faint trace of amusement crossing his expression. "Only the ones who do not fall apart," he answered. And for a moment, Lily did not know what to say, not because the words were complicated, but because they landed somewhere deeper than she anticipated. She looked down at the sidewalk, processing it, then shook her head lightly, almost to herself. "I almost did," she admitted quietly. "I just did not want to give them that." He nodded once, as if that made perfect sense, because it did, and they continued walking, the city stretching around them in layers of light and shadow, familiar but different now, like she was seeing it from a slightly altered angle, one where she was not trying to prove she belonged anywhere specific, just existing within it, step by step, until they reached the corner of a quieter street, the noise of traffic fading into a distant hum. Lily slowed slightly, recognizing the direction now, recognizing the route she had taken so many nights before. After long shifts, after small victories, after quiet disappointments, this street did not judge, it did not measure worth. It simply existed, steady and unchanged. "I live a few blocks down," she said, stopping just short of the next intersection, turning to face him fully for the first time since they started walking, the streetlight above casting a soft glow that made everything feel a little less sharp, a little more real. He stopped as well, hands still relaxed at his sides. "Then this is probably where I stop," he said, not asking, not assuming, just acknowledging the natural end of something that had never been defined to begin with. Lily nodded, her fingers tightening slightly around the paper bag in her shoes, as if holding on to the moment just a second longer. "You never told me your name," she said. After a brief pause, her voice steady, but curious now in a different way, not cautious, not guarded, just open. He looked at her for a second, like he was deciding something she could not see, then replied, "Alex." Simple, easy, like it was enough for now. Lily studied him for a moment, then nodded once, accepting it without question. "Lily," she said, even though he had not asked. And something about that exchange felt balanced, equal, like two strangers meeting in the middle of a moment. Neither of them had planned. A car passed slowly behind them, its headlights briefly illuminating the space before fading again, and neither of them moved immediately, not because they needed to stay, but because leaving meant acknowledging that whatever this was, it was temporary. And yet, as Lily shifted her weight and took a small step back, she realized something unexpected. This night, the one that had started with loss and humiliation, had not ended the way she thought it would. It had not fixed anything. It had not rewritten her reality, but it had given her something she did not even realize she needed, a reminder that even in the middle of being dismissed, unseen and unwanted, there were still moments, still people, that saw her clearly, and for now, that was enough to take the next step forward. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the quiet stretching just long enough to make the air feel heavier than it should have, and Lily shifted her weight slightly, aware that this was the kind of moment that could either fade naturally or linger longer than it was meant to. She chose the first, offering a small nod as she stepped back another inch. "Good night, Alex," she said, her voice calm, grounded in a way that surprised even her. He held her gaze for a brief second, then returned the nod. "Good night, Lily." And just like that, something unspoken settled between them. Not an ending, not a beginning, just a point in time that both of them would remember for reasons neither could fully explain yet. Lily turned, her bare feet brushing softly against the pavement as she made her way down the quieter street, the city noise fading behind her with each step. She did not look back, not because she did not want to, but because she had learned that some moments were stronger when you let them stay exactly where they happened, untouched, untested, just real. The streetlights above cast long shadows across the sidewalk, familiar buildings lining the block, their windows glowing with lives that continued regardless of what had happened to her tonight. She adjusted the paper bag in her hand, taking another small bite as she walked, slower now, more present, like she was finally catching up to herself after everything that had unfolded. Her apartment building came into view after a few minutes, modest, slightly worn, but steady, dependable. The kind of place that did not promise anything except shelter, and right now, that was enough. She reached the entrance, slipping her shoes back on briefly just to step inside. The lobby quiet except for the faint hum of an old vending machine in the corner. She exhaled softly as the door closed behind her, the outside world sealing itself off for the night, and for the first time since the ballroom, she allowed her shoulders to relax completely, not because everything was fixed, but because she had made it through the hardest part. She walked up the narrow staircase, each step creaking slightly under her weight, a sound she had grown used to, a rhythm that belonged to her life, not anyone else's. When she reached her door, she paused for a second, her hand resting on the knob as her thoughts flickered back, not to the rejection, not to the humiliation, but to something quieter, a voice, a presence, the way someone had looked at her without expectation or judgment. And she realized that what stayed with her was not what she had lost, but what she had unexpectedly found. She stepped inside, setting her shoes by the door, placing the paper bag on the small kitchen counter, and for a moment, she just stood there in the dim light, letting the silence settle around her. It was not lonely, not empty, just still. She reached into her bag, pulling out the ring box, turning it over in her hand once more, the weight of it different now, not heavy with meaning, but light with release. She set it down beside the bag without opening it, without needing to, and instead, her eyes drifted to the handkerchief still wrapped loosely around her foot. She bent slightly, adjusting it, her fingers brushing the soft fabric. Again, and something about that small, simple detail made her pause, because it did not belong to the life she had been chasing. It belonged to a moment she had not planned, and somehow, that made it more real than anything else tonight. She straightened slowly, a quiet breath leaving her lips, and as she moved toward the small window by her bed, looking out at the faint glow of the city beyond, she did not feel like someone who had been left behind. She felt like someone who had been redirected, and somewhere, just a few blocks away, whether she admitted it or not, a stranger named Alex had become part of that new direction in a way she did not yet understand. Morning did not arrive gently. It slipped in through the thin edges of Lily's curtains in pale streaks of light, quiet but persistent, the kind of morning that did not ask how you felt about the day before. It simply expected you to continue. And for a few seconds, as she lay still beneath the worn blanket, she almost forgot, her mind floating in that brief space where nothing has fully returned yet. But then it came back, not all at once, but in pieces: the ballroom, the silence, the words, the walk, and finally, the stranger. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on the faint outline of the ceiling above her, and instead of the tightness she expected, there was something else, something steadier, not relief, not happiness, but clarity. She exhaled softly and sat up, her feet brushing against the floor, the handkerchief still loosely wrapped around one of them. She paused, looking down at it. Her fingers lightly touching the fabric as if confirming it was real. Last night had not been a blur. It had happened, every moment of it. And somehow, that small piece of cloth felt like proof that not all of it had been lost. She stood, moving toward the small kitchen area, the paper bag still sitting where she had left it. She opened it again, taking another bite, slower this time, more aware, like she was allowing herself to exist in the present instead of replaying what had already passed. The city outside had already begun its rhythm, distant car horns, footsteps on sidewalks, the low hum of a world that did not wait, and for the first time in a long while, Lily did not feel like she was chasing it. She felt like she was stepping into it on her own terms. She finished the last piece of bread, brushing her hands lightly before moving toward the small table near her window, her sketchbook resting there, slightly worn at the edges, familiar, untouched from the night before. She hesitated for a second, then picked it up, flipping it open, blank pages waiting, not demanding anything, just offering space. And for a moment, she simply stared at it, not because she did not know what to draw, but because she realized she did not have to draw what she thought people wanted to see anymore. She could draw what felt real, what felt hers. She picked up a pencil, her fingers adjusting naturally, muscle memory taking over, and began with something simple, a line, then another, shapes forming slowly, not perfect, not planned, just honest. Her hand moved steadily, her thoughts quieting with each stroke, until without realizing it, she had drawn a pair of shoes in one corner of the page, slightly worn, carefully placed, and beside them, a folded piece of fabric, soft, unassuming, and across from it, a figure standing still, not defined by details, but by posture, by presence. She paused, looking at it, then leaned back slightly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips, not because the drawing was remarkable, but because it felt true. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the table, pulling her out of the moment. She glanced at it, expecting nothing important, maybe a bill reminder or a missed notification, but instead, it was an email, unfamiliar sender, subject line simple, direct, regarding last night. Her brows furrowed slightly as she opened it, her eyes scanning the words carefully. An invitation, formal but not distant, requesting her presence at a meeting later that afternoon. No explanation, no details, just a location, a time, and a name at the bottom, a name she did not immediately recognize, but something about it felt connected, like a thread she had not noticed before. Lily stared at the screen for a moment longer, her grip tightening slightly around the phone, not out of fear, but uncertainty, the kind that stood right at the edge of possibility. And as she lowered the phone slowly, her gaze drifting back to the sketchbook on the table, she realized something quietly. Whatever was waiting on the other side of that invitation, it was not just about what happened last night. It was about what came next, and this time, she would not walk into it trying to be chosen. She would walk into it as herself. The address in the email led her to a part of the city she rarely visited, where the buildings stood taller, the sidewalks cleaner, and even the air seemed quieter in a way that felt intentional, controlled. Lily slowed slightly as she approached the glass front building, its name etched in steel beside the entrance. Understated but unmistakably important. People moved in and out with purpose, dressed in tailored suits, voices low, confident, and for a brief second, the memory of the night before flickered in her chest, not as fear, but as recognition. This was the kind of place she had once tried to fit into, the kind of room that had decided she did not belong. She adjusted her coat lightly, her fingers brushing the edge of her sketchbook tucked inside her bag, grounding herself, then stepped forward, the glass doors opening smoothly as she entered. The lobby was expansive, polished floors reflecting soft overhead lighting. A receptionist glanced up, offering a practiced but polite smile. "Can I help you?" Lily hesitated just a fraction of a second before nodding, her voice steady. "I have a meeting," she said, giving her name. The receptionist's expression shifted almost immediately, not dramatically, but enough for Lily to notice. "Of course, Miss Carter," she replied, already reaching for the phone. "They are expecting you." Lily felt something tighten briefly in her chest, not anxiety, but awareness. This was not random, not casual. Someone had arranged this. And as she was directed toward The elevator, escorted rather than simply pointed, that awareness deepened. The elevator ride was quiet, smooth, the numbers lighting up one by one as she ascended higher than she had ever been in a building like this, each floor carrying a different kind of weight, a different level of distance from the life she knew. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that felt even more deliberate, less crowded, more controlled. A hallway lined with glass offices and quiet conversations that paused just slightly as she passed, not openly, but enough to remind her she was being noticed. At the end of the hallway, a large set of doors stood closed, and beside them, a woman in a fitted suit greeted her with a nod. "Right this way," she said, her tone professional but not cold. The doors opened, and Lily stepped inside. The room was expansive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a long table centered beneath soft lighting, and several people already seated, their attention shifting toward her as she entered. For a brief moment, the air felt familiar again, not because she belonged here, but because she recognized this feeling, being evaluated, being measured. But this time, something was different. She did not shrink. She did not adjust her posture to fit their expectations. She simply walked forward, steady, present, until she reached the end of the table where a single empty seat waited, positioned not at the edge, but near the center. She paused, her eyes scanning the room once. And that was when she saw him, seated at the far end, no longer in shadow, no longer just a quiet presence on a sidewalk, but unmistakably composed, confident, and entirely in control of the room. The same man who had walked beside her the night before, Alex, or at least the version of him she had met. Her breath caught for just a fraction of a second, not because she was surprised he was here, but because of the way everyone else seemed to orient around him, the subtle shift in posture, the quiet respect, the unspoken acknowledgement of authority, and then, as if sensing her realization, he met her gaze, steady, unchanged, but now carrying a different weight. "Good afternoon, Lily," he said, his voice the same, calm, measured, but now filling the room in a way it had not the night before. "My name is Alexander Hayes," he continued, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. "And I believe we have something important to discuss." And in that moment, the space between who she thought he was and who he actually was disappeared completely, leaving her standing at the intersection of everything she had just walked away from and everything she had not yet understood. And for the first time since receiving the email, Lily realized this was not just an invitation, it was a turning point. The room held its silence just a second longer than necessary, as if everyone inside it understood that something invisible had just shifted, and Lily remained standing where she was, her eyes locked on Alexander Hayes, the name still settling into place, reshaping everything she thought she knew about the man who had walked beside her just hours ago, the man who had offered her food without hesitation, who had spoken to her without expectation, who had seen her when no one else in that room had. And now he was here, not as a stranger, but as the center of it all, the one everyone else waited on, deferred to, measured themselves against. Lily inhaled slowly, grounding herself, her fingers tightening briefly around the strap of her bag before she stepped forward and took the seat offered to her, not because she felt she belonged, but because she refused to step back again. Not here, not now. Alexander watched her quietly, not with surprise, but with something closer to approval, subtle, almost unnoticeable, but real. "Thank you for coming," he said, his tone steady, professional, but not distant. Lily met his gaze without hesitation this time. "You made it difficult to ignore," she replied, her voice calm, carrying just enough edge to remind him that she had not forgotten how this all started. A faint shift moved through the room, a few exchanged glances, the kind that happen when someone breaks the expected rhythm. But Alexander did not react, not outwardly, if anything. The corner of his expression softened slightly. "Fair," he said simply, then leaned forward just enough to signal that what came next mattered. "Last night was not supposed to happen the way it did," he continued, not as an excuse, but as context. "But what did happen told me something I cannot ignore." Lily held his gaze, silent, waiting, not filling the space for him, not helping him explain, just letting him continue. "You were placed in a situation designed to evaluate people," he said, his voice even. And instead of adjusting yourself to pass, you walked away. He paused briefly, then added, "That is not something we see often." Lily felt the words land, not as praise, but as recognition, and that difference mattered more than anything else in that moment. She straightened slightly in her chair. "So this is what?" she asked, her tone controlled. "A reward for not playing along." A few heads turned more noticeably now, the tension in the room shifting again. But Alexander did not look away. "No," he said, clear, immediate. "This is an opportunity because you did not need one." The words hung there, simple, direct, and somehow heavier than anything else he could have said. Lily blinked once, processing it, because she understood what he meant. Even if she did not want to accept it too quickly, he reached for a folder on the table, sliding it toward her without pushing it closer than necessary. "We are launching a new initiative," he continued. "One that requires someone who understands value beyond appearance, beyond performance." He paused, just enough for the words to settle. "I want you to lead it." Lily did not reach for the folder right away. Her eyes remained on him, searching not for answers, but for truth. And what she found there was not manipulation, not calculation, but something far more unsettling in its simplicity, sincerity. She finally glanced down at the folder, then back up. "You do not know anything about me," she said quietly, not as doubt, but as fact. Alexander nodded once. "I know enough," he replied, "because I saw what you chose when no one was offering you anything in return." Lily felt something shift inside her again, deeper this time. Not the uncertainty from before, but something steadier, something that felt like control returning in a way she had not expected. She reached forward then, finally placing her hand on the folder, not opening it yet, just acknowledging its presence, her choice, her decision. "And if I say no?" she asked, her voice softer now, but no less certain. Alexander leaned back slightly, his expression unchanged. "Then you walk away," he said, "the same way you did last night." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his expression. "And I will know I made the right offer." Lily held his gaze for a moment longer, then slowly, deliberately, opened the folder, her eyes scanning the pages inside, the details, the scope, the responsibility. And as she read, the noise of the room faded, the past night blurred into the background, and what remained was something clear, undeniable. This was not about being chosen, not anymore. This was about choosing. And as she lifted her head again, meeting his gaze one more time, the hesitation that had followed her into this building was gone, replaced by something far more powerful, certainty. "Then let us make sure it is worth it," she said quietly. And this time, when the room shifted around her, it was not because she did not belong. It was because she had finally stepped into a place where she did not need to ask.